If you enjoy my videos, then please like, subscribe, and share. It's the only way my little channel can grow. Hey everyone, welcome back to Engelbard. Today I'll be giving you my review of the just released Streets of Rage 4. If you watched my Genesis Top 20 Games videos, you'll know that my top game for the system was the excellent Streets of Rage 2. When Streets of Rage 4 was announced, I was practically giddy. Then I saw the screenshot and I became, let's say, apprehensive. After a long wait, the game is here and I've put quite a few hours into it, both solo and multiplayer. So sit back and relax for a few minutes, while I tell you all the things that will make you want to punch me. Streets of Rage 4 was a project with quite a few companies in its development team. Lizardcube, who did the really cool Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap overhaul a few years back, dotemu, Guard Crush Games, and the PC port was done by Blitworks. I played the PC version for this review. See, I have Microsoft's $5 a month PC-only gamepass, and this game was included with it. I do have to note that the PC version had quite a few technical problems, but I didn't hold those against it in terms of this review. Let's start with the graphics. Yeah, I still don't like the way the characters look in this game.
No sir, I don't like it.
It looks like you're moving around animated color forms, and it just doesn't fit in with the gritty style of the original games. The characters are just too overly cartoony and simplified. Some of the backgrounds are pretty nice, using lots of detail, many layers of scrolling, some depth of field and lighting effects, and some other fancy effects. The game sort of has a style, I guess. Still, it's my opinion that the characters and backgrounds don't really look like they go together, and that creates kind of a weird overall package. Next up, music. I didn't really know what to expect from the music and where they'd go with it in a modern Streets of Rage. The first two games had absolutely incredible soundtracks. The third game had an incredibly bad soundtrack that for some reason has its fans. Streets of Rage 4 brought back the original composers plus others to craft its soundtrack. What do we end up with? Well, it's a very mixed bag. First off, it's definitely not bad, so you don't have to worry about that at least. Some of the songs are pretty decent and catchy. Some of them sound just like generic music. Yeah, you're treated to a much higher sound quality this time around thanks to modern technology, but unlike the first two games, there are really no songs that you'll be humming along with or even really remember after you're done with the game. If you love techno and house with a little jazz mixed in, then you might really dig the soundtrack. The original songs are mostly okay, aside from a few I found kind of annoying. Streets of Rage 4 does also have some highly remixed songs from earlier games in the series, and they're recognizable, but honestly, I prefer the originals. So for the music, I'd say it's just slightly above average with one or two good songs, but really nothing as good as what you would find in Streets of Rage 2. Which, maybe the devs knew because you can play through the game with a pretty authentic sounding version of the original Streets of Rage 2 soundtrack. When it comes to sound effects and voices, you get some good, some bad, and some weird. A few of the hit sounds are kinda weak and lack impact, while others are good, appropriately deep and bassy. Voices range from okay to yeesh. Blaze sounds like a 10-year-old girl for some reason. Some of the choices just seem kinda strange to me. Again, there's nothing disastrous here, but I'd say the sound effects are just average. So what about gameplay? Even if the graphics and sound are just kinda alright, awesome gameplay can really elevate a game. Does Streets of Rage 4 have awesome gameplay? Well, I would say Streets of Rage 4 plays well for a modern brawler. It's definitely above average for the genre as it stands today in April of 2020. It's been a long time since I've played a new scrolling brawler that I actually enjoyed, and for the most part, Streets of Rage 4 is a pretty fun time with a few caveats. So first up, if we're comparing this game to the earlier ones in the series, the basic gameplay is most similar to Streets of Rage 2. It uses that game's feel as a point to build from, dropping a lot of the advanced stuff that debuted in Streets of Rage 3. For instance, you can no longer run or roll dodge anymore, and stars don't level up your special moves, instead they let you do a new power move. You also lose the timed meter that lets you use your crowd control specials without losing life energy. What's been added partially makes up for some of the things that were so callously removed. If you use crowd control specials, you lose life no matter what, but you can recover that sliver of life by quickly pounding on enemies. You have an air special now also, so you get 3 special moves from the special button instead of 2. You still have your double tap attack specials. You can now juggle enemies for combos to increase points, which you need to gain extra lives. I'm not a big fan of juggling enemies in games like this, but I made sure to do it pretty often throughout my playtime, since it's really how this game is meant to be played. Another addition is you can now catch thrown weapons in midair after they bounce off something. Yeah, gotta admit, that one's pretty cool. You also get a few extra basic moves in your repertoire, like mini air combos. There were 2 gameplay issues I found kind of annoying in Streets of Rage 4. First, some enemies, particularly bosses in this game, just cheat. They basically get invincibility frames, sometimes while you're right in the middle of attacking them. They'll start flashing, which means, get away, you can't hurt them until they stop flashing. Some roll from one invincible move immediately into another. Lame. The other annoying thing is they changed the controls slightly, so now you have an extra button used to pick up food and items. The problem is, it also throws and drops items. I found that most of the time I had a weapon in hand, it often got dropped even if I was standing right on top of the food I was trying to pick up. That part wasn't too much fun. The game has 12 stages, lots of unlockable characters including 16-bit versions of returning characters, some hidden 16-bit mini-stages, several game modes including story, arcade, boss rush, and a versus mode, local 4-player co-op, and 2-player online play. Options are a little light, but you can choose your food types, which is, well, it's a thing you can do. You also get to look at character and background artwork, including several things that were unused in the actual game. And like I said before, you can switch to the Streets of Rage 2 soundtrack if you want. I will note that on the normal difficulty, story mode is pretty easy, and there's a decent chance that you'll be able to play all the way through the game and finish it without ever having to continue. The arcade mode is significantly harder since, well, you can't continue in arcade mode. Lots of enemies return from prior games with redesigns, and there are a fair amount of new ones as well. Most of the returning enemies actually look pretty decent. I'd say they look better than the player characters, honestly. There are also quite a few enemies that do not show up in this game. Hate those jetpack guys from Streets of Rage 2 and 3?
Good news, everyone!
They're not in this one. How long is the main game in Streets of Rage 4? I'd say most people will probably be able to finish story mode in roughly an hour, maybe a little bit more. If you can survive arcade mode, it will take just about as long. The 12 stages feel like a bit of overkill, and it's a little surprising a few of the greatest hits levels, like a factory with conveyor belts, didn't make it into this game. Most of the levels are pretty interesting, but there's a few duds mixed in. One other game I had on my mind while I was playing Streets of Rage 4 was Streets of Rage Remake, which was an unofficial fan game released several years back. That game remixed the graphics, characters, stages, and music from the first 3 games in the series, and frankly it was just lovingly updated and was very, very well done. The only real flaw in that game was they didn't quite nail the enemy AI, but other than that it was really amazing and it's fantastic. If we're talking overall content, then that fan game from years ago unquestionably feels superior to this new professionally developed title. I'm not reviewing Streets of Rage 4 in comparison to Streets of Rage Remake, but I'm also not going to pretend that it doesn't exist. So in the end, what did I think of Streets of Rage 4 as a whole? And how would I review the game on a 0 to 10 scale? Let me explain.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
The graphics are mixed with some nice backgrounds that clash with the simple, overly cartoony characters. The music is not bad, but feels a little bit low impact for a Streets of Rage title. Regarding the gameplay, it's pretty good and it feels like an updated Streets of Rage 2, with enemy juggling and a few extra moves along with plenty of unlockables. While I liked Streets of Rage 4, it doesn't feel like a classic to me that will stand the test of time. It feels kinda low budget and I don't see it sticking with people the way Streets of Rage 2 did. It's still worth a few playthroughs, whether you're going solo or playing one of its multiplayer modes. It's not quite the game I was hoping for, but hey, if it does well enough, maybe they can fix some of the things I didn't like about this one in the sequel, right? My final review score for Streets of Rage 4 is 7 out of 10. One final note for those playing the PC version of the game. you might have some trouble with the game crashing or frankly not even launching. I and several others experienced these issues while playing the game. I didn't hold those issues against the game since I was still able to play it all the way through a few times, try out all the different modes, unlock a bunch of stuff, and spend a lot of hours with it. While a friend and I were playing multiplayer though, he got kicked out of the game, and even hours later, after closing and reopening the Xbox app, rebooting his computer, and trying just about everything he could, he still wasn't able to launch the game again. That brings us to the close of another video, my retro and non-retro gaming friends. What do you think of Streets of Rage 4? Want to angrily yell at me for my different yet valid opinions on this game? Well, that's what the comments section was made for. With that, I'll say thanks for watching, and see me later.